This is Scott Morey with 111 Advisors. This is part of the CREtech program, and I'm super excited to have two guests today on the main stage. Tim Kern, who's CEO of Building Engines, and Daniel Koza, the Chief Product Officer. And this session, and really these series of sessions, are around real estate and sustainability and where that's going, and the challenges in the marketplace, where tech fits into that, what tech is doing well, where it can improve. And I think, before we jump in, there's sort of three overall pillars when we look at technology, and I think the two of you agree with it. So one is around finance and accounting, and sort of the bucket of solutions there, which have been in place for a while, but really didn't catch up as kind of what I would call enterprise level tools probably till the last, I'd say probably, 6 to 8 years. Then you've got a bucket around leasing, which has ebbed and flowed over the last couple decades, showing my age, but clearly has a dominant player in that space today. And the third pillar is around building operations, which is where you guys operate in and what this conference is based on. And as you know, there's a lot of movement there, and Building Engines, of course, has been a leader in that space for a couple decades now. But you've continued to sort of expand and grow on how you meet your customers' demands and what you do out in that space. So, Tim, I'd love for you to talk in more detail around sustainability, building operations, and kind of how you view the space and how you see Building Engines within it.
Yeah, awesome. We've been building operations software for 20 years now. We came into the market in 2000, and we've certainly seen trends, ups and downs, peaks and valleys through those 20 years. We were in the market for 9/11, and a lot of the security concerns, came into play at that point as one example. And, sure enough, during all those 20 years, every owner and operator is always focused on NOI, always focused on tenant satisfaction. And there's certainly a balance there. You want efficiency and effectiveness all happening at the same time. And those priorities change over the 2 decades we've been in the market. And right now, what you're seeing is a shift. The last 10 years has really been about amenities and flexibility, maybe sometimes called the WeWork phenomena, really delighting the tenants with all kinds of interesting things in and around the space. And that certainly is going to continue. But right now we're seeing a new shift to safety, security, comfort, confidence, communication. That's really the big surge. So when it comes to that third pillar of CRE, building operations, super important right now, especially as we try to get these buildings back up and running and filled with tenants. So it's an exciting time and just another trend in a great direction.
So as a follow-up to that, a lot of folks are saying what happens in cycles like we're going through now is it accelerates existing trends that were already started. And you touched on that kind of briefly. Is your view the same, meaning these were things that Building Engines is already focused on, and now you're seeing increased demand? And then the second part of that is just kind of at a more category level, what those trends are and what you're doing around them.
I'll comment generally, and then we'll get Daniel to chime in too. But I think that excellent building operations is a trend and an increasingly important part of CRE, and that's the case. I think what we're seeing here is shifts that need to be flexible, the need to shift gears from one area of importance to another, to be dynamic, be flexible, be agile, which is going to show up in both processes and people, but also in software. So we're real focused on having software products that allow for that agility and that nimbleness. Daniel, what do you think? What else would you add?
Yeah, I think, look, what drew me to this space at all and to Building Engines is that CRE was already starting to go through a bunch of change, right? The addition of modern technology in general across the board is awesome, right? That's what I live for. as a product guy. And the definition of building operations, I would say, has changed in the last few years, right? It's come to encompass not just tenant satisfaction, but tenant engagement, right? Building communities with all the amenities that Tim just mentioned. And I think we are seeing it go through another shift now with COVID, right? Let's call it out. Of course, this is going to come up a bunch during this conversation. With COVID, how important are amenities and the community building that was happening before? It's really tough when the building's hardly occupied at all. But that's still exciting from a product perspective. I think we're going to see tenants coming in as they go back to their buildings, asking for some different things, less yoga classes and more, how do I know my folks are safe, right? How do I know that you're implementing all the safeguards that make me feel confident? And that kind of shift, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but to your point, Tim, having software that is flexible, easy to adapt and repurpose for different means, that's valuable. And that's an area we've been investing.
Well, let's go down that track further, Daniel, around safety and sort of security, which is a trend. And as part of that, a couple of things come into play around transparency. And then you got categories around that. So if you talked about the air and the safety of the air, clearly because of COVID, right? And people looking at that, but around incidents and maintenance requests, and there's a whole slew of things. Just talk about in more detail, kind of at a feature level, what that means and what's kind of been accelerated as a result.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. The list you already made goes on and on, right? We could look at every piece of software out there, every module that we have, and think about the ways that module will be impacted by what's going on now. But let's make a few concrete examples here. So I think the first one is communications in general. You used the word transparency. We've seen a number of our customers make even heavier use of our building communications software as a means to message all of their tenants and even their vendors what their new protocols are, whether they're open or closed, what capacity they can have. Just the need for information when everyone or most people are remote is huge, right? It's much more increased need. You can't go into the building and read signs if you're sitting at home. So we're seeing our customers repurpose our building communications software in ways we wouldn't have guessed, right, until COVID. So that speaks to the transparency. I think we've seen the frequency of communications go up, as well as sharing a lot more detailed information. So documents, not just one sentence texts. We're seeing documents and protocols get written and distributed to tenants, a lot more procedure and policies going out. That's one example. Another one I'd point to, it's a particular favorite of mine, is visitor access. So there's some great solutions out there. Building Engines has visitor access, but there are entire companies dedicated to providing really excellent visitor access for both the lobby and tenant spaces as well. And I think this is back to the flexibility point. If you have a system that allows for generic pre-check-in and post-checkout procedures, you're in a great spot with COVID, right? Because it's no longer just about look at somebody's ID and get them in. You might be doing, depending on your building, you might be doing temperature checks. You might be asking a questionnaire on where they've been, if they've quarantined, having been out of state. There's all sorts of new things nobody would have predicted. But if you've got a flexible system that allows, again, for pre-check-in and post-check-in procedures in general, you're sitting in a good spot. Those are two examples we've seen and thought about a lot.
And then Tim, you want to expand? Are there other trends you think that are also happening as a result?
Yeah. I think that the need for well-documented workflows, well-documented processes, records, a database of what's happening in that building, and allowing for the reporting and transparency. So how clean is the building, and what can we tell the tenants about cleanliness? What's going on with the air quality? Are we changing filters? Are we keeping the HVAC system, the air handling system up to date and running well? So I think it's just heightened need for data, processes, service level agreements, and really driving towards, the most effective and transparent operations, probably we've ever did.
If I could add one thing there, Tim, those are really good points. Our inspections module in general is an area that's getting totally repurposed. Now you're seeing plenty of our customers building cleaning checklists and making sure that the hand sanitizer stations are all filled, right, constantly. And that's just, it sounds simple, but having a procedure to do it and the transparency to make sure it was done, right? The reporting that, yep, these inspections are happening on a weekly or even daily basis. That gives a building manager the confidence they want.
Now, Tim, I believe Building Engines is really dominant in the office space, but you've got a decent sized retail customer base as well. So are there differences you're seeing between those two, and how are you reacting to that?
Yeah, we've always served both office, retail, and industrial. And we've had a number of different property types outside that, but the three core CRE categories we're covering well for the last 20 years. The needs are different. So, which parts of our application get used by office are a little bit different than retail, a little bit different than industrial. I think at the core, though, these same principles still apply: service levels. What should the tenants now in retail? The tenants are the retailers, but you've got a lot of consumers coming into those spaces too. So the whole package between the landlord, the tenants, and the consumers that are in and out. Same thing: visibility, assurance that things are running well. HVAC, you have a lot of HVAC units in those cases that all independently are being operated and serviced, usually by the tenants in those lease agreements. So different level of scrutiny. Are those things being done well? Landlord probably wants to make sure those are being driven properly by those tenants. So again, same principles, different applications.
Gotcha. Daniel, I want to switch over to you on this next question, but there's been a theme as we've had this conversation around flexibility. And of course, part of that is just as an end user of Building Engines, or just in general, right, around the means to control and better kind of manage, right, what I'm doing. But the other part is technically, and I know recently, right, you guys announced you've replatformed and have that. So can you share more around kind of what's changed from the old to the new, and then how that plays into being, flexible and meeting the demands of your customers?
Yeah, yep. So you're right. Yeah, we just made our first public announcement about Prism, our new platform. That was last week we announced it, but it's been in the works for a couple years. And one of the driving tenets of our design for Prism was based on, I wish I could take credit for this, but it's actually just being in other industries that are more tech saturated than CRE. You see how those industry goes, and you can kind of be in an oracle, right? It's like being a time traveler. When you go to an industry that isn't yet saturated with technology, you can kind of take some of the tricks from the other industries and pull them in. Well, one of those tricks is in a fragmented space, which is what we have in CRE. There's lots of point solutions, lots of great products out there, but not a lot of them talk well together. There aren't a whole lot of comprehensive platforms in CRE yet. So one of our founding principles with Prism was APIs. It's that simple. It's make sure you build in APIs from the start. And what APIs let you do, for anyone listening to this that doesn't know, it's a way for systems to talk to each other, right? It's letting software talk to other software. It's an interface so that they can pass back and forth data or messages and do something useful and interesting. A problem with a fragmented space like we have is you might see a great solution as a property manager. Hey, if I wire up my access control system and the guard at the front desk and my property operations software, look, I could have this type of dashboard. The problem is that's really hard to do today because those are 2 or maybe even 3 different vendors. If all of us, not just Building Engines, but if all of us invest a little more in APIs, we can at least let our customers, be able to wire these systems together. So APIs is a huge thing that gives us flexibility internally. It lets us work well with partners. And acquisitions, frankly. When we make acquisitions, we can pull them into Prism more easily because of those APIs.
So given, Daniel, the critical nature of building operations and sustainability, and talking about it from a technical standpoint around security and privacy, the demands are a lot different today than they were even 6 months ago, and certainly than years ago. Can you expand with your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's another one. Same example as I mentioned before, where these are tricks you take from other industries, right? So CRE has not had, to my knowledge, a major public breach of privacy information yet, but every other major industry has. And boy, why wouldn't we, this is what we've done at Building Engines, but why wouldn't we as an industry get ahead of that? And let's try to be the industry that doesn't have that big breach, right? Or at least has fewer than other ones. So what that means are, they're controls. It's operational controls, it's compliance, it's honoring. So on a security and operational side, it's SOC 2 compliance. On a privacy and kind of data protection side, it's GDPR if you're international, it's CCPA if you're in California. And I suspect over the next few years, we'll see regulations like those pop up I hope it pops up in every state. Protecting customer data is a big deal. It should be important. But those are things we've invested in as a platform. And so that means when you come in and work with Building Engines, whether you're a separate product or an acquisition, we put you under those same operational controls.
Those are great points. Tim, I want to shift categories and shift to you. We're all certainly on the office side reading all these reports about what's going to happen to office space. And you got people saying we're going to need more space, we're not going to need any space. But at minimum, I think we know space is changing and the use of space and how they configure it and how they look at it. So I'd love your thoughts kind of on that front, and then sort of how that impacts, what you do and how you look at the market.
Yeah. I think it goes back to flexibility again. We're going to be going through phases of reoccupation, new normals. A lot is going to change. We're still learning how to deal with a pandemic like this. There'll probably be some notions around preparing for another one, at least until the memory of this wears off. So we're being asked by our customers for things around space flexibility and configuration. And that goes for the landlord and the common areas. How do we flow people in and out of the building, egress and arrows and where we're all going to stand, and how to use elevators effectively, and of course the tenant spaces as well. So we're getting requests on both sides to help figure out how would I reconfigure and mold my space over time. So I think you're going to see a surge, at least for now, around dealing with space and how now. And I think to your point, it's not clear that we're going to need more square feet or less square feet. It really is a matter of how this evolves. And I think being able to go through that evolution, having that flexibility and adaptability is key. And that's what we're trying to, strive for.
So in line of that then, and I agree with your point. So one thing I actually kind of believe to be true is the average number of square feet per employee is going to go up, which has shrunk for years. But I guess time will tell, right? Depends how you do that calculation. But there's definitely a shift in the physical configuration of that space. So as you talk about space management, but also equates to people coming in and changing that space for them. And there's how do you find those vendors, identify those vendors, and bring them in? And so I'd love to get sort of your view of that world as well.
Yep, great question, Scott. There's definitely a need for more vendors in general. That's one case that you just gave, but there's a need for all different types of work coming in, whether they're reconfiguring a space, whether they're putting up signage. We see having access to a lot of different vendors, having a vendor network as really important, because yes, we have identified a few areas for vendors right now. Those needs are going to change as folks come back to the office. They're going to be asking for all sorts of different things. How do you get prepared for that? Have access to a big vendor network. Tim, would you add anything there?
No, I think again, goes back to some of those tenets too, like risk management, safety. Are we really picking high quality, safe vendors? Are we moving them in and out of the building, effectively across all the tenant spaces? So a lot of this continues to go back to the same principles, and they apply in all these different areas of, operations today.
Yeah, insurance too, right? Making sure they all have up-to-date COIs. which is another thing to think about when you're pulling in folks from the outside, right? Vendors from the outside, making sure they're properly insured. Yep.
No, those are all great points. A couple more questions here, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up. But if you look on a broader basis, and I'm an owner and operator of a portfolio, and I'm trying to find someone that I want to partner with on this category, and there's a lot of different solutions out there. I mean, I think you're dominant in your category, but the category is pretty wide, right? In some ways, pretty deep. Like, what advice would you give me as a potential buyer of software in the space to guide me to sort of finding the right partner to work with? What are those characteristics you think that are important?
I could start with that one. I think customer focus is what made us what we are. We pay attention to our customers. We care about servicing them. They're guiding us. They're guiding us in the areas that we need to develop into. So we're actually doubling down on vendor management right now, building out that, again, customer driven, investing in innovation, in usability and experience, really caring about everyone. In our case, we're lucky. We don't just delight tenants. We don't just delight engineers. Our users span property managers, asset managers, vendors are users of our system. So we've got this luxury of really delighting, probably 10 different user types across our application. So I think it's picking a software company that really cares and is about delighting the market, delighting their customers on top of the technology. So, make sure you've got the security, the scalability as an enterprise class system and all those areas that Daniel described. We made the hard decision to replatform, rewrite, start over. We had a 20-year-old product, huge amount of knowledge in that application, a huge amount of functionality, but it wasn't going to be the solution for the next 20 years. Things have changed in the last 10, 20 years, and we had to make that investment. So I would, again, is your partner making those investments? Do they care that much about the market space and the customers?
And then Daniel, for you as the Chief Product Officer, when you look out into the future, what are sort of the major categories that you think the market's going to ask for and that you're focused on in delivering?
Yeah, let me give a general comment there, and then I'll give you a couple specific predictions. The general comment is the themes that we've already talked about here. Of course, I want everyone to buy building engines for their operations platform, but whether you buy us or somebody else, make sure they talk about APIs, talk about flexibility, look for partners that they've integrated with, because you want to invest in something that you're going to be able to work with for the next decade or 2 or 3. And that means wiring it to your other systems. You're going to need to do that, and you're going to want to do it. So just make sure, that would be my advice. Make sure you've got that APIs and flexibility with the vendor you choose. More specifically, where are things going? We talked briefly about space management, but that is, I think, the tip of the iceberg. I think, finally, digital twins, which have been talked about for more than a decade in other industries, I think CRE is the industry to actually make digital twins a very useful concept. And that means it's not just pretty visualization. It's pretty visualization wired into real-time data, to operational data, to tenant data, so that you can actually make decisions on it. With IoT seeming to get more and more traction, the more you've wired up your building, it can actually respond. So it may not just be feeding you data, you might be able to push changes from some digital twin dashboard. So that's an area that I'm personally invested in and would like to see that grow. I think that'll be a big change for us, for the industry.
Well, great comments. We're near the end here. Tim, do you have any closing comments?
I just think it's a super exciting time. I've been in real estate tech now for 15 years, and it's getting better and better. The innovation, the investment from private equity and venture capital. I think we're just lucky, the three of us, to be part of this industry right now. It's just a super exciting time. we certainly don't want the horrible year that we had this year repeated. That's for sure. But it keeps us on our toes. It does push us to be better and better. And it's going to be challenging to operate great buildings going in the next 12 months, and we're up for it, and it's exciting.
Well, you guys are awesome. I can't thank you enough for participating on this panel, and I also want to thank CREtech. Wish you guys the best and hope our paths cross again. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome.